Welcome back to a special Labor Day edition of Busted Open, and pleased, really grateful to be joined by not only an icon of pro wrestling, but a guy who's come out with just a tremendous read. The book is called Wrestling with the Devil by Lex Luger. Lex is in studio with us. Lex, Doug Mortman, Dave LaGreca, it's great to see you in person here up in the studios. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
So what made you decide to put pen to paper and write this book?
Man, it took a lot of time, thought, and prayer, because I was one of those guys in school that, man, I needed help just writing a 2-page essay. I dreaded it. So I thought of doing a book with so many people asked me if I ever was going to do a book, told me that I should do one. A lot of mentors and people that I respect, that it would be good to put it out there just for people to be able to read my story. That finally, a guy who represents Tony Dungy, DJ Snell, a great guy, approached me about doing a book. And then Tyndale, who also does Tony Dungy's book, I have a lot of respect for Tony. He's a great guy. I knew they would handle the book in a really good way for all the right reasons. So when all those doors opened, I pretty much said, well, I'm the only one that's in the way now. So I had a great writer, John Hollis, and a great publishing company, and a lot of people that definitely, without them, I couldn't have done it. So I'm really pleased the way it turned out. So
it's a great read. It's an easy read. I mean, that's what always is intimidating for me, is that, I get bogged down in books. This one, we flew through. Our producer, Mike Riker, enjoyed it as well. Let's dive in and start at the end. Not the end, but from being a quadriplegic to being able to walk again. I mean, we know you're in the chair now. We know some temporary setbacks.
Speed bump.
Just, some spasming, Lex was telling us before the interview. But we saw you walk, too, when you were enshrining Sting into TNA's Hall of Fame a year ago or so. How were you able to come back from one of the most ultimate, debilitating injuries? I mean, basically not being able to walk or move your whole body. I
really can't explain it. The people have asked me, the doctors. At Stanford, where I first went when it happened in the hotel, to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, the top neurologist in the planet, they all said I had a 0 to 5% chance of any movement from the neck down. I'd be fed, bathed, clothed, my teeth brushed every day. So the amount of movement and neurological, no, I don't have 100% neurological restoration yet, but things I'm able to do, live on my own and drive and walk, I explain in the book, is really, they can't explain it and I can't. I'm just extremely thankful. They're like, it's really like a supernatural miracle. It really is.
Wow. And Lex, one of the things about this book, because there's so many wrestling books out there, it seems like every former wrestler has their book. But what makes yours different than all those others is it's actually a positive book. I mean, you don't point fingers at anyone. You don't blame anyone. And you've been down the road, back again, and forward and backwards and sides, and you've taken every exit on the way. Was that your intent when you wrote this book, that you wanted to make it positive?
Well, I always felt that anybody that writes a book, or you hear them on interviews tell their story about something that they did for years, that they benefited from, and that there's so many fans out there. I mean, wrestling was never the problem I had. Wrestling, the fans are like second to none. The pay-per-views, I got to travel all over the world, meet all these incredible people. I mean, it was a 15-year dream, like the 4th of July fireworks. Wrestling was never the problem with anything in my life. That was personal things I did. I wanted to point out in the book that I made decisions, that I made poor decisions. The problems in my life were never wrestling. Wrestling career was just like it was like a magic carpet ride. It was fabulous. And wrestling's a blast. I wanted that to come out in the book, that I really enjoyed wrestling. It was great. Great opportunity. I still do. I mean, I actually have a better appreciation for it now. Sometimes when you're doing it, you don't have the appreciation that when you look back on it, that it comes out.
Do you ever look back at your life and think about how unbelievable and remarkable it is when you put in context Gridiron Star, a guy who, by all accounts in your book, you weren't a lover of pro wrestling, and then a guy who becomes the total package, and NWA and WCW and WWF, and then back to WCW, and this iconic career, then with all the adversity that you were up against. do you almost look back and say, how did it come to that? What happened in my life to have this drastic change? And do you look back at it a whole and do you scratch your head sometimes and saying, what an unbelievable life I've had?
Oh, yeah. It's a roller coaster journey when you read the book. And I look back now and how I even got into wrestling that I go into is it's not that all the football players love wrestling. I mean, all of us guys did, but none of us really thought of doing it. When I said I was going to do wrestling, they thought I was crazy. I just walked in the off season in the Championship Wrestling of Florida, and before the off season was over, I was in football. And I'm sorry, I was in wrestling. My wrestling career had already started, so it was like even that was absolutely incredible when I look back on it.
And you weren't a wrestling fan. I mean, you actually got into pro wrestling without even being a fan of it going in.
Well, people say not a fan. I mean, we all loved wrestling, but I wasn't an avid, grew up watching it. My grandfather used to watch. When I was a little kid, I remember. He used to sit in front of the TV and watch it back in Buffalo, New York. But I didn't grow up watching. I was all about traditional football and basketball and sports like that. Yeah.
Two guys that, we all know as pro wrestling fans, one of which we were very aware of the connection that you and Sting have. But Nikita Koloff, I was really interested in reading this book and the kind of connection that you and he had. Talk about Nikita and the influence on your life.
Well, back in wrestling days, we didn't hang out because Nikita was a different kind of dude even back then. He wasn't a evangelist or a preacher or anything, but he used to just go back to the hotel and I don't know what he did. He used to just, he didn't go out with the guys. So him and I didn't hang out, but we've been reunited in the last few years, and he's just become a very, very, very special friend of mine. He's a mentor of mine, just like Sting. And he used to, I say in the book, he used to drive from Charlotte in the morning, come to stay with me at Shepherd Center all day long and sit with me, feed me, pray with me, then drive all the way back to Charlotte that same day, like almost a 4-hour drive. That's, when you have an injury like that, your family and friends, when they rally around you like that, it gives you a new meaning to the word love and friendship, for sure. So he's a very special friend.
The first time we interviewed Nikita Koloff, I was like, who the hell is this talking? I never heard Nikita Koloff break character before. I really thought, the guy could barely speak English. He had that thick Russian accent. I didn't know who the hell I was talking to the first time I spoke to him. He's a guy that, he believed in the character.
He went all the way with it.
Yeah.
Legally changed his name, his family, his girls. He didn't even break character on his daughters when they were little because he thought they might not understand him. Might say, my dad really speaks English. And he has some incredible stories, how far he took. He spoke Russian around the house. Even his kids didn't know he spoke English.
That's awesome.
That's really buying in right there.
Yeah, he was at a grocery store one time, and he told me a funny story real quick. This guy in the grocery store was so excited to see him, and he could tell he spoke fluent Russian, and he didn't understand a word he was saying. So he had that demeanor back then. He was such a heel, back in the day when there was that Cold War and the Russian chain around his neck. He was great. He was like most hated heel of the 80s at that time. We had the boycott of the Olympics, just the whole thing. And this guy was all excited talking Russian and following up to the checkout line. He's just hoping the guy goes away, but he wouldn't. Finally, he goes, what he talks, goes, when in America, we speak American. And the guy got so scared the way he looked and glared at him because he had that scowl, and he just totally backed the guy off trying to get him to speak Russian. The guy never really understood that Nikita didn't speak Russian.
That
was pretty good thinking on your feet to intimidate the guy like that and let him know that you're American, you speak American.
Oh, once a heel,
covering that he didn't speak a word of Russian.
Did you ever have any crazy stories when it comes to fans, like at a grocery store, at the mall or something? Not Mall of America, not that story, but an interaction with a fan.
Well, there are a lot of wrestling fans can be very, I like to use the word vociferous, but there's no real. I got kind of I had a lot of crazy stalkers, and back in that day, but really some of just the little things, interactions that they do, like you're standing. I don't mean to be gross, but you're standing at the urinal at the Atlanta airport, and the guy walks up and puts a piece of paper in front of your face and says, "Here, sign this," there's a lot of little interactions. You're like, are they serious? They're just, it's pretty just wild things like that all the time.
Speaking of Sirius, the beauty of SiriusXM, you can say whatever you want. That's the great thing about satellite radio.
Yeah, that's true.
Totally uncensored. Although I'm guessing we're not going to hear too much explicit language from you, Lex.
No, I try not to these days.
Yeah.
See, if somebody did that, I would just turn to my right and said, "Sure, what do you want me to sign?"
I thought about it at the time. Believe me.
As you continue to do your thing.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
camera.
I was in a different frame of mind back then.
Stay classy, Dave. Let's get into Sting for a second because, go back to NWA days, and you guys are really, you're kind of competing for the same spot. You're competing to be that guy versus Flair. Yet, you're developing this bond, this kindred spirit. In pro wrestling, I can't imagine that's an easy thing to do with somebody that you're really vying for the same spot, that top guy.
Yeah, I think that was more before we actually became friends because.
Well, what was the relationship like then?
I saw him coming up, and I could tell he was going to be a huge star. And he was watching me kind of in the magazines before we even met. Then for first round show, I was always at these big like pay-per-views or like TV tapings. So we kind of just avoided each other. Till finally, I told him the book, he tried to break the ice with me, and I just completely blew him off. I mean, I was so cocky and so arrogant that he just walked away shaking his head. I go into detail in the book, and thank goodness he gave me a second chance. We became fast friends after that. I think Sting was such a confident guy in his abilities and ability to perform in the ring. And I also, at that time, was the same way, that I felt that they really wanted my look at the time. Once we became friends, knew we did the same things. He taught me so much about how to eat right and training. He was a bodybuilder. I came from football, so we just really hit it off. And with the same schedule, we ended up becoming. It was funny. He said, "God, we're almost like we're married. We spend more time with each other than our wives." We'd walk out of the gym, and whichever car you said, and you gotta know when we had the back seat of the rental car, you want to be able to reach your bags. If you're on the right front, you want your bag on the rear left. If you're on the your driver, you want the bag on the rear right of the back seat, so you can reach into your bag and keep your eyes looking forward. And we used to walk out of the gym. Whoever had the car keys, we'd hand each other our gym bags, knowing that the one guy got on the one side would put the bag behind him, and I'd put his bag behind me. I mean, we looked at each other like, this is getting scary.
A little scary. Right there.
Yeah. We know each other so well and what to do. We had everything when we traveled, like down to a science. Wow. That's how close we were on the road, yeah.
So, Lex, you didn't get that body from peanut M&Ms and vodka?
That's the first time I met him, I credit. He had to compliment me, and I told him I got my great physique was from eating peanut M&Ms and vodka.
And then you wonder why your relationship didn't get off on the right foot.
No, he walked away shaking his head. Like, are you kidding me? You're worse than I thought.
So how was the transition, to go back a little bit, the transition from being this football star to get into pro wrestling? And how did you finally take that step?
I just walked in the Championship Wrestling office of Florida and said, I play football currently. I was just honest with him. I don't know much about wrestling, which I was honest about, but I'd like to learn a bit more about it. I had seen, obviously, Andre and Hulk Hogan, and I'd seen all the headlines and indoor attendance records broke. I just want to find out something about it. Maybe it's something that might be available for me. I had no clue how fortunate I was. They introduced me to Hiro Matsuda, who became an incredible man, incredible mentor, taught me, took me into the dungeon for a few months.
Talk about getting lucky there. I mean, you got yourself one of the best in the biz to train up young wrestlers. Just ask Hulk Hogan.
Trained Hogan, Mr. Wonderful, so many guys. Did it. He didn't have a school, didn't ask you for a dime of money.
Wow.
Just did it because he loved pro wrestling, wanted to give back. If he saw some guys he thought potentially had the ability, he wanted to train them. So to get hooked up with him, he even went to the ring with me for my matches the first couple of months to make sure everything went smooth. He was like a dad and a mentor. What an incredible guy. I never would have gotten into pro wrestling if it wasn't for him.
Lex, about a month or so ago, we had a show strictly on best announcers in the history of pro wrestling. You work with a bunch. I mean, you started with Gordon Soley. You work with Tony Schiavone. You work with David Crockett, Jim Ross, Vince McMahon. I mean, in your opinion, who was the best announcer? Was it a Gordon Soley?
Well, I think if you go old school Gordon Soley, I wasn't even a wrestling fan who goes, like I said, I wasn't an avid watcher. Like everybody knew who Gordon Soley was back then. I got in the. But we got a Pier Street 6 brawler here. Just his voice. He had like a cough. I remember he had a cough button they used to have. He was just a old school pro. I loved him about it. You got Jim Ross is fantastic, and Vince always. He's a great announcer, and there's been a lot of great announcers. But I would say Gordon Soley is definitely right there at the top of the list with a bunch of other guys for sure.
You and Lex are on the same page?
Yeah, Gordon Soley. My partner Doug mentioned a name just before that I have to ask you about, Ric Flair. I mean, every time we mention a name, everyone will say he's the best of all time. Do you believe that? And then also fast forward to some of the troubles he's had in the the last few years, actually.
Rick is definitely one of the greatest of all time. Depends on what formula you're using to evaluate. I think what Rick's unique ability was for me, once again, how thankful am I looking back, to work hundreds of matches with him early in my career. It was like a night off for me. And to have Rick in the ring, that he's one of the all-time, not just technicians, but tacticians and ring psychology. And Rick, to me, I think one of the things that's underrated, not enough people talk about, which is, Rick has an incredible heart. Rick was a star maker. Yeah, he used to escape with the belt, and everybody loved to hate him. He was the champ. But, man, he put so many guys. He put Sting and I on the map. I mean, if Rick came down to Florida and told Croc, you got to have this guy. I mean, if it wasn't for Rick, once again, I don't know if I would have ever made that jump from Florida to the NWA at the time. Rick is talk about a guy who had his ego in check in that regard and really wanted to make other stars. I mean, that goes right into the Bible, discipleship. I mean, Rick discipled so many incredible talents and put them on the map, like such as a prime example, Sting and I. We wouldn't have been where we were. He put Sting on the map. Sting admits that every time. Rick. So our affection for Rick is personal. We're very thankful for him. But I think that definitely, and he was a great world champion. So and what an entertainer, one of the best guys ever on the mic, on the stick. So you got to put him at the right top. And if you talk about drawing, no one drew like Hulk Hogan. I mean, in the business ever. So, I mean, you got to put him up there just for that factor alone. So, but yeah, Rick is definitely, and today we all still hope and pray and believe that Rick, as stubborn as he is, the nature boy, we think he has an incredible story to tell when he finally, I think, comes to realization that there's a much bigger eternal perspective on his life. And we all reach at different points, but I think when we're kind of faced with our eternity, I think Rick's going to have an incredible story to tell someday soon. So his current struggles, I think, are temporary.
Yeah, and for somebody like you, Lex, who's been given a lot, who's had a lot of help, you were just, mentioning Nikita, how he helped you, and I'm sure, many, many other people you could put in that category. Is Flair at a point where somebody needs to reach out to him? Because it seems like everywhere he goes, and this is just reading news reports and getting some inside scoops and whatnot, he's always ending up in some sort of trouble. Like even just recently, this past weekend at SummerSlam, he was released from the gig that he was at because, whatever happened. Is he at the point now where he needs one of his pals from the past or the current to come? Rick needs some help here.
Well, I only look back at myself, and people read my book, they're like, are you kidding me? Everybody else around me saw my life was a train wreck. I'm not saying Rick's life's a train wreck. I'm just saying, sure. I'm talking about me. And but I was the last one to see it. So I say there's always hope. I mean, everybody has their own breaking point where I feel that their life can be turned around when they get themselves out of the way. I was in my own way of my life being turned around. So I feel that there's definitely hope for Rick, and Rick has to reach that point. We all say, man, if he doesn't get it this time, but people said the same thing about me. I was on many top vote lists, believe it or not, there are those. I was going to be the next dead wrestler found in a hotel room.
Wow.
So, like Scott Hall, who's in Atlanta now, doing great.
Yeah, amazing.
Who would have thought
story.
Scott Hall would turn around? He's doing incredible.
Jake Roberts.
Yeah. So, I figure there's always hope for guys. A lot of us haven't. There's a lot of guys, unfortunately, that aren't with us anymore. But with Rick and everybody else, I always believe that there's hope because there was hope for me.
Again, it seems like DDP seems to be that guy now that is the one that's trying to reach out to everyone and get them on the right track.
There's the Jersey boy with a big heart. Who says the boys up here don't have a...
There's a few.
Yeah. I mean, DDP used to come visit me in Shepherd all the time. And I'll be honest with you, he wasn't one of the guys I would have thought would come visit me. So, and help me have me do his DDP yoga and would come over to my place and pick me up out of and lay me on the floor. And so, man, he's got a huge heart. So he's doing a lot of great things with those guys. I'm so proud of those guys. Man, they're doing great.
That's great to hear.
Him and his son Cody come by my house and hang out. Scott's looking the best I've seen him in so long.
Wow.
Yeah. And you're right. Lex. He was on that list. If we had, it's not something we ever want to wager on, but he was the guy.
I was too, so I understand. Yeah.
I like to look back and just see starting points, jumping off points. Was the Horsemen one of those jumping off points for you in terms of great run, more than put you on the map? Now you're with the group and you're living the lifestyle. Did the lifestyle start to then spill over into your personal lifestyle? Were you actually living the Horseman lifestyle at all times?
You think? Yeah, I was a wonderful father. By all people's viewpoints back in Atlanta, husband, father, pillar of the community, businessman. Then I go on the road and just live a complete double life. It was what they don't know won't hurt them. What stays in Vegas, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. And our generation, it's changed a lot now. Had that work hard, play hard mentality, and it was almost like we were like the wrestling mob on the road. We could do whatever we wanted. We didn't have accountability, even from let alone mentors in our life and people or God that we're accountable to. We didn't have the paparazzi and all the phones and the things videotaping us everywhere we went or where we were hanging out afterwards. So we had a lot more leeway, which really wasn't good for a lot of us back then. So yeah, I started making a lot of bad choices and going down the wrong road, for sure. Like a lot of the guys did.
Yeah.
But you almost had to being in that group, huh? I mean,
you wanted to fit
be
in.
part of
that
it.
doesn't excuse it, but I wanted to fit in, no doubt. But the Four Horsemen professionally, yeah, personally, I started getting off track. But that once again wasn't their fault. That was my fault.
Right.
But the professionally was I didn't even realize I didn't even know what Arn Tully looked like first time I met him. I wrestled in Florida, but I didn't even. If you had showed the picture of him, I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup. I met JJ Arn Tully the first time I went to Carolina to do a TV taping.
Wow.
But I didn't realize at the time, I'd heard, you're going to be one of the Horsemen. They're like, everybody went nuts. I go, man, there must be really something to this Horseman thing. I think to this day definitely ranks as one of the greatest all-time bad guy groups for sure.
And, a lot of people talk about DX, they talk about NWO and the Attitude Era, but I always saw the Horsemen as the start of when, the heels became cool and people were cheering the heels.
Love to hate. Yeah, because we had all think about it. It was scripted that way. When you have the world champion, the U.S. champion, the tag team champions, and JJ standing there and our manager, and it was very appealing. It had a lot of glitz. It had a lot of glamour. Rick was interviews about limos and private jets. So yeah, a lot of people liked us. A lot of people loved to hate us. It was definitely when you first started seeing fans. I saw a lot. Sometimes cheer the heels and boo the babyface.
Well, because as a 14-year-old, I don't want to hang out with Dusty Rhodes. I want to hang out with the Four Horsemen.
I think that changed wrestling a lot because even to this day, there's still not that clear, like the old school wrestling delineation between a good guy and a bad guy. Now,
especially
even with John Cena now. I mean, he'll go out and there's that smattering, of booze and things like that. I think the Horsemen started changing that,
Yeah, cynicism also for wrestling fans. Plus, you even mentioned it before, multimedia and the internet and everything that's out there, it changes the way you view pro wrestling. And now you're so knowledgeable.
Right.
That it does. You as a promoter, you as Vince McMahon or Dixie or whomever, they have to think about on a large scale, we got to blur the lines or else people are going to, a regular babyface like John Cena, I just want to boo him out the building. Now you have to use that as almost an angle, and he's almost a heel to a certain extent.
Exactly.
The book, again, is amazing. Wrestling with the Devil by Lex Luger. We have him in studio for a few more minutes here. You just said a name that I wanted to bring up, which is Dusty. I was floored. I did not know. How much did he have to do with the total package and with the torture rack?
Oh, instrumental. He basically was a group effort, but when I came to the NWA at the beginning in the WCW days, Dusty named me the total package, had all the announcers say it, and he said, I want you brains and brawn, I want you to have it all, and the right look. He said, we'll call it, and he goes, I want you to have the total package when you're out there and do your interviews. And he goes, man, I just kind of like, he thought, I like that. I am a genius, he said, we're going to use that. He had all the announcers do it. I don't do a good Dusty Rhodes, but
that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
I'm a genius, if you will.
That's real good.
Yeah, so he got the nickname, and they were trying to think of different finishes first. For me, they go, just use a power slam. You look so impressive. We're going to have you just with a power slam or something. They go, and one of the guys said, well, there's this, they did a couple things where you pick a guy up and they go, let's do that. They called it a backbreaker back then. And they had me do it in the back. And they said, can you pick big guys up doing that? I go, I think so. I was real strong back then. And they had me go out on TV and do it the first time. And they called it the backbreaker. And then Dusty came up with the name, slapped him up in the torture rack. And it went from backbreaker torture rack. It became my signature finish most of my career.
Lex, you had a great story for us off air, so I'd love for you to say it on air. And that's when you got kicked out of the Four Horsemen. You know, you had what was it in Long Island? It was the pay-per-view in Long Island, Bunkhouse Stampede, and JJ was supposed to win, and you kind of, you took the victory, and that started the whole angle where, you were very you weren't thinking of the group, Lex.
I wasn't.
You're very, very, very selfish.
Once again, rebellious. That's throughout the early part of my book. Yeah.
So justifiably,
it came naturally.
Justifiably so, the Four Horsemen attacked you, and you had the white tuxedo on with the blonde locks, and they gave you a beating, but you were scared with the blade. Go into the story about exactly how that all went down.
I never got color or bladed myself before, and I go, look, this is live. This is a huge turning point. We're kicking you out of the Horsemen officially tonight. We're going to beat the snot out of you, and we're going to end up just running your head into the back of a limo and leave you laying there in a pool of blood. And we got to get some color, kid. This is it. And then they go, you haven't got color yet, have you? And I go, no. So they had me drink a couple like Cabassiers. I forget what it was. At the hotel room, and aspirin to thin my blood. So it's one of the old school tricks that makes your blood thin a little bit, so it runs more. We want a lot of color, kid. And but they didn't trust me to blade, so they had JJ carry the blade on his finger, so that after they ran my head in the limo, he would do something to me and get some color on my forehead, and it wasn't necessary because it was such a beatdown, and they ran me back to the back of the limo. I wanted to look so good when they ran my head to the back of the limo that I gaffed my whole forehead. So I said before I came here, I thought, busted open. I go, what a great name for a show. I said the whole way here, it reminded me of that limo thing. I had a white tuxedo on, and I had to drive back to a luxury hotel down in the ritzy part of Miami and walk through the lobby. You've seen the guests and all the women dressed up in their men, and in the lobby hotel, I was covered in blood from head to toe. My shoes were squishing. Ugh. The limo looked like a CSI crime scene inside. I remember the driver's eyes were as big as saucers, looking at me in the back of his limo, bleeding all over his limo. Oh my gosh. He kept saying, "Can I take you to the hospital? Take you to the hospital." No, just get me back to my room. It was like a flood. We never got that on camera because I didn't know anything about color. And I laid the head down, and I was running on the ground. They go, "Why didn't you lay back?" And we could have seen all that blood coming. I blew it. I blew the shot.
Oh yeah, you weren't thinking while you're covered in blood.
They go, "Pick your head up, let him see it." I was like, "I'm sorry."
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Wrestling with the Devil, the book by Lex Luger. A few more minutes with the total package. Now, WCW to the WWF. Now you're working for Vince. That's got to be interesting. And you came in one way, and then they changed it to the narcissist. So, I remember the narcissist Lex Luger. But
well, it fit the bodybuilding thing. He had me come in.
Sure did. But that was the question. It was really like the bodybuilding. Why did you use the bodybuilding to start? Was it a way to kind of make your way into WWF without getting into any issues there?
Yeah, I had a year off from wrestling, but I couldn't wrestle.
There was no compete,
so,
right?
Yeah, so Vince said, well, why don't we just do a little stuff with you? I want you to come work for me when your year's up. Let's throw in a little bit of bodybuilding stuff in the year, and then we'll enter you in that way.
He's always thinking.
He does. He's the master marketer. He is a marketing genius.
Well, we can't sign you
can't
sign you as a wrestler, Lex, but we'll sign you as a bodybuilder. That's not competing.
He eats, sleeps, and breathes. I never saw a guy get up early and up late and just thinks about wrestling and marketing. He's incredible. He really is.
Do you have a relationship with Vince McMahon now? I mean, I know you left. It wasn't the best circumstance when you jumped ship to WCW.
As he watched you walk out in Mall America like everybody else? Wow. Yeah, that was probably the low point for him and I because he was so good to me when I was in WWE and had me come to his home and just treat me like family and not give notice when I went to Mall America. It was part of the stipulation because of all of you guys.
Sure.
then they want everything to be a surprise and try to swerve people. So I couldn't tell. It was part of the deal, and I didn't feel good about it because he'd been so good to me. So our relationship definitely, I felt, was at a low point there. But he contacted me through most of my times, and either himself or through mutual friends. Are you okay? Is there anything I could do for you? So yeah, we don't talk all the time, but that really meant a lot to me. And he's a class act.
Is that a move? Is that a move?
He does that for a lot of guys. He portrays that villain on TV. Behind the scenes, Vince says they'd say there's no union. The guys that get out of wrestling don't adjust well. He's done so many things behind the scenes to help guys, not just legends contracts, unofficially, of guys and families who the guys aren't there anymore, who he helps. I mean, he's done a lot of good stuff behind the scenes. He really has.
That jumping ship, as Dave pointed out, to back to WCW, is that something that you look back on your career and regret? And would you do that over?
Going back to WCW?
Well, not going back to WCW, but doing it so, cloak and dagger and, just not telling anybody.
Oh, no.
And there you are. Now you're signed to a contract with WCW. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, it would have been an easy decision for me now, I would hope. That, look, guys, I'll come, and I want to work with you guys.
But I got to tell my boss.
I got to tell Vince.
Yeah.
To me, now it would be a no-brainer. And if you don't want me under those conditions, I'm going to stay where I'm at. Now I would hope it would be an easy decision. Yeah, definitely. Looking back, I would do it differently now.
Now, we're here in Midtown Manhattan. We're not too far off from one of your better moments. And I'm not talking at Madison Square Garden on 33rd. I'm talking about near the Hudson, at the Intrepid. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I go into that in detail in the book. It was an incredible promotion on July 4th, and to have those guys out there in the hot sun that day, the weather was perfect. I mean, Vince dialed it up. He had me come out a helicopter ride. I was the narcissist. He said, and I go, how's this going to work? He goes, trust me, it'll work. And man, when I slammed him, the crowd went nuts. I mean, it was set up really well. Push Bobby out of the way. I didn't know Bobby was going to come at me. I thought Bobby was trying to tell me something. So Bobby came running up to me on the aisle, and when I got off the helicopter, I'd never been in a helicopter before like that. I was scared to death. I almost wet my pants. And then I got off the thing, and Bobby comes running up to me. I was like, Bobby, I was wanting to give him a hug, and he goes, push me. And I couldn't hear what he was saying. I go, what are you saying? He goes, push me, you idiot. Vince of every little detail. When you come down, I'm going to have to send Bobby to you. You're going to push him away to let everybody know, oh, this might be a different Lex here. He just pushed Bobby away. But they didn't tell me, so I'm thinking, hey, Bobby. And he's like, push me away, you idiot. I'm like, oh, boy. And I tell people I got in the ring, and I had boots on. I practiced at headquarters a week before slamming yoga. He was 627 pounds. We weighed him a trucking scale one time in Europe when we were killing time at the baggage claim. 627 pounds. So
I'm sure Yoko's going to love that, by the way.
Oh my God, we had to get.
Thanks, guys.
We called him Yoko. We had to get a Yoko chant. Yoko. We all weighed ourselves already, so it was his turn. So we gave a Yoko chant, and finally he stood up and did it. But 627 pounds. Oh, wow. He was an incredible guy. So agile, and I had no footing. I'm supposed to be there, nose to nose, trash talking him. In the ring when all hope was lost, but here comes Lex in his Yankee Doodle Dandy red, white, and blue shirt and his jeans and collar boots being stylish. I got in the ring with those boots on. I almost fell down just trying to stand up. I was on ice skates. Ooh. So how am I going to slam this guy? I did it in Nikes with good footing back in headquarters and still was, touch and go. We all said, well, with the adrenaline, we'll get it, And now I'm on these ice skates, so I'm nose to nose with Yoko, so I'm supposed to trash talk him. I'm going, my eyes are big as saucers going, Yoko, we can't do it. I go, I'm on ice skates. I go, I have no footing. He was people realize they thought he was Japanese, but he was an island brother. Those island brothers are so cool, and they're so agile. You see them all in that line, the defensive lines in the NFL now. They're such great athletes. Even at that size, he basically, when he came out of that corner and I moved out of the way and I was supposed to slam him, he basically slammed himself. He's so agile. He just said, no problem, brother. Just get a wide stance. I'll do the rest. And he walked away from me. We went and he took a swing at me. I blocked it, and boom, boom, boom. And we went to it. And he basically stands up and goes, you knew ahead of time you were going to slam? I go, yes. People that still thought wrestling was all real. They go, but you acted so excited. They said you looked like you were that you did it. If you knew beforehand, you must be a really good actor. I go, no, I was so, as you know now, relieved that I was able to slam with those boots on. I really was, unbelievably excited. It was an incredible marketing event, and it really went great. It was a great idea by Vince.
Awesome. Favorite moment? Or if not, what's your favorite moment?
Yoko will be one of them, and the Intrepid. The Four Horsemen, the whole thing was definitely one of the best. And I would say the surprise win over Hogan on Monday Nitro that they didn't tell me until right before I went to the ring. They told the referee as he was ready to go to the ring because they didn't want anybody even in the back to be able to, well, we don't tweet back then, but they didn't want anybody in the back to reveal the finish. So I found out right before I walked to the ring, and he found out on the way to the ring that I was going to win the title. And the NWO was at its prime. I mean, they were just, it caught everybody off guard. So that was a great moment.
And Hogan had total creative control. So Hogan basically said, I want Lex to win this title for me. Is that how the story goes?
Yeah, he at the time, Hogan felt that, and Eric and the powers that scripted everything, I never really got involved in much. That's what they felt, that the fans needed a little crumb, that they'd beat us all up every night, and that people strew the ring with tobacco juice and nachos. I used to have to, funny people said, I used to have to go at the end of the live show. They wanted to send the crowd off happy in these sold out arenas. So they'd have me go back, and Sting would come out of the ceiling and save the day. I'd be laying there with nachos and tobacco cups of juice on me and hot dogs. And I'd strew, and I had to go back to the locker room. I finally ended up just showering with my wrestling gear on because they were playing my music to go back out for a dark match. So I had to shower the nachos and tobacco juice off. But it was an incredible era in wrestling, and they just felt that moment. There was part of my relationship. I developed such a good relationship with Hogan. He saw the response. Really, with Sting coming and going from the ceiling, I was like the representative sort of. I got sympathy for more sympathy probably for the first time in my career. And they thought if we give the fans a little crumb, then take the title back the following week at the pay-per-view, at least we gave them a little something leading up to the big thing with Sting. They didn't want to lose the fans. Just heat. They wanted to give him a little hope. Like a little hope spot before Sting came in to wrestle Hogan. That there can be a chink in their armor. Because at that point, there were people like, man, wow.
When all was said and done with WCW, in your mind, why did it fail?
I don't think it ever really failed. The ratings were down dramatically for WCW, just like Vince's were at one point. How many weeks in a row did WCW stomp, and the replay was beating him?
True.
And no one said, why'd they end for Vince? Vince just kept on going because that's what he did. The difference is, in my opinion, AOL Time Warner wasn't in it for the long haul, wasn't in their blood like Vince. It wasn't their family business. So as soon as our ratings went down, they went down bad for a while. They said, I tell them a story that I knew that they weren't in wrestling long term. It wasn't in their long range AOL, Time Warner, TNT, TBS plan to have wrestling. When they saw it go down like that, they saw that as an opportunity to get rid of wrestling, in my opinion. And who knows, if they were committed like Vince was, 2-3 years later, WCW might have been on top of ratings again.
It's a great take.
I blame Jane Fonda. I blame Jane Fonda for the fall of WCW. Every time I see that woman's face, I blame her for the fall of WCW. If Ted Turner didn't marry her, if they didn't get divorced, he wouldn't have sold to Time Warner, and then there would still be WCW.
There's another key take. You may have something there because
he's being serious.
With Ted Turner, because I always have my wrestling because he said that's what brought him. The Weather Channel and the wrestling and stuff was what kind of made him. So I'll always have wrestling here. And when he lost having any control at all, we knew what the suits, we called them, and AOL Time Warner thought wrestling was kind of a good ratings, but black sheep in their programming. And I talk about in the book of an event I went to where I knew that when they had the chance to get rid of wrestling, they were going to get rid of it.
Yeah. Every time Barbarella comes on my TV, I get nauseous.
God.
Yeah, we could still be having Monday Night Wars
That's
now,
right.
possibly, yeah.
Still could have had Monday Night Wars, but another company decided they couldn't compete. TNA, they tried, and I don't want to say they failed. Similar to you, how you're saying with WCW, they didn't want to compete anymore, so they moved back to Thursdays. I would have liked to have seen a revise of the Monday Night Wars, or hey, WCW could have still been in existence.
Who knows?
If you think about what
you
Lex
never
is
know,
saying.
man.
Fascinating take.
It's all one family now. I look at it. I mean, they bought all the tapes and all the stuff.
They got damn near everything, Lex.
They do.
My goodness.
They are. I call it not ginormous. I call it ginormous. It'd be very hard to take them head on now. They are so big.
And I think that's what TNA saw.
Yeah.
That it was just impossible.
It's just impossible. And to the WWE's credit, you can pop on your TV today and I can watch Lex Luger.
Yeah.
I mean, to their credit, they didn't, dissolve the history of the NWA, AWA, and WCW. If anything else, they let it thrive and to keep it in the memory of wrestling
That's
fans.
where you get to see Sting at his
Yeah,
best.
absolutely.
In the the WWE library. Pretty amazing.
I'm kind of glad it ended in their hands because who's going to take better advantage of that library over the long term?
Yeah.
We didn't see it right out now. You see they have 24/7. Almost you can on-demand Lex Luger matches. I mean, they whose better hands to get stuff be in that library than really theirs?
True.
Yeah.
Lex, you talk extensively in the book about it, Wrestling with the Devil, amazing read here. Sting actually wrote the foreword in this book. But you talk about Elizabeth. And, I can't imagine how difficult it is for you to rehash that. But ultimately, what did it boil down to with Elizabeth? Were the both of you just had a special connection and you were just kind of feeding in to all the bad things in life together? I mean, how did it all go down? Ultimately, you write in the book, you were kind of leading a double life.
Yeah, I was, obviously. And I think that for me, in retrospect, when I look back, the crowd I hung with and Elizabeth and I became close friends. And the whole crowd was doing what we were doing. We were all popping pills and mixing alcohol with it and everything. And I was so focused on myself back then that I wouldn't admit to myself that I was out of control, let alone think that someone else close to me was. And I mean, she always will be the first lady in wrestling. It was such a tragedy what happened. I can't even put that into words. And looking back at my life now, that people think, oh, well, you hear people say, I'm only hurting myself. What I do with my body, what I want to do, if I want to do drugs, you hear kids say, well, it's my body, I want to do. No. What you do affects everyone around you, decisions you make. And I was making a lot of bad decisions back then, and those affected Elizabeth. People go, well, it wasn't your fault. She did what she wanted. She chose to drink and take pills. Going, well, that's ultimately, is that true? Yes. But I go, did I have a profound effect on her behavior back then and what she did and what she didn't do? Yes. Instead of being a good leader, a person who was a good influence around people, I was a bad influence around people back then. So it just was I talk in the book of just a horrible, emotional, indescribably emotional tragedy to lose her at such a young age and what she meant to wrestling. I played a direct role in that. God's forgiven me, and I've been able to forgive myself to move forward. So you have to, but yeah, it's in retrospect. You talk about regrets. Definitely, her and the influence I had around her is a big regret.
But Lex, it seems to be a familiar trend with a lot of wrestlers. We talked about in the beginning of the interview about a lot of wrestlers dying young. That seems to be the trend. I mean, it's almost rare that you see a wrestler from the 70s and 80s live past the age of 55.
Yeah, collateral damage there of all the guys around each other. I really believe that trend's changing now, even with the guys my age. I'm 55 now. I guess I've outlived. I guess I Googled it one time. You can Google anything. The average football player only lives, I think, 54.
Wow.
Which the NFL's kept quiet, and the only thing worse is wrestlers. Our average age is, I think, 47.
Jeez,
that's not good.
So yeah, but I think we're finally, with awareness and counseling and what Vince does with his wellness programs, and I think just the attitude, kids are more into their screens now than doing drugs. A lot of them.
Which is also
not that there's not drugs
good
out there, but which is a whole other topic. But I agree with you. But it's definitely changed. The work hard, play hard, drink and do drugs. It's not tolerated anymore. It's not cool.
That's a good thing.
It's really not cool. That's a good thing. So I think we're turning the corner now with these young guys, and if we work more and more, and the guys that are breaking in to conduct themselves the right way in the road, and caution them what they can fall into and who they hang out with is important. The influence they have on others is important, which I didn't think about, what we just talked about. I think we're turning the corner on that now. I think we're going to see that change over time. It's going to take time, I believe in a good way it's changing.
Lex, before we let you go, we know how important faith and God is to you. Tell us about Pastor Steve and what he really means to you, and the influence he had on your life.
You talk about a sold-out atheist, science evolution guy. Me, Darwinism, didn't go to church. I thought anybody that talked about God or Jesus was religious. And man, anybody talked about it, I gave him the Heisman. I called the leg up and the hand out. And for God to put a guy like Steve at a low point in my life in jail when I was going to make my one big comeback, and thought, man, what's the use? I don't think I'd be here today. For God to put him in my life and him just to be my friend and not try to talk about Jesus or talk about, God to me, and just became my friend and hung out with me and ended up, it's called be relational, testimony really, and to share the gospel and the good news with a guy who would never listen. I mean, it's just supernatural. I mean, God does the saving. And, when people heard I was hanging out with a pastor and El Chaplain, they thought I had just completely lost my mind. They were the last person. Lex Luger was hanging out with the pastor at the gym, working out. For God to put him in my life and hang out with me and end up him sharing the gospel with me and how my life supernaturally changed after that for the better is just incredible. I'm so thankful for him. He's a very dear friend. He was texting me this morning. I saw you on Fox and Friends. He was so excited. He's a great guy. Yeah. I don't believe, none of us know. I don't think I'd be here talking to you today. It wasn't for Pastor Steve.
And what a talk it was, Lex. Thank you so much for the time. Again, the book, Wrestling with the Devil, a must-read. I loved it. Dave loved it. Mike Riker loved it. I know the Busted Open Nation is going to love it. Thank you for your time. And, just to share a quick story with you, J.J. Dillon, we were talking with him literally hours before he was to be enshrined in the WWE Hall of Fame. And it's funny how the conversation's going, and sure, we're asking about Flair, and we're asking, about Arn and Tully and all that. And, of course, your name comes up. And the praise that he heaped on you, and just saying, the Lex, whatever happened to him, the guy I know now is a completely different man. What an amazing human being. Was just amazingly complimentary words about a man's man. It takes a real man to admit some of the things that is right here in this book. I give you a ton of credit. I know JJ did, somebody who knows you real well. So I just wanted to share that story with you because it stuck out in my head. Yeah, stuck out in our head because it was pretty impactful.
Well, thank you. I really can't take the credit, but I appreciate that, and thank you guys so much for having me on, and I've really enjoyed this. It's been fun.
Thanks, Lex.
Thank you. Have me back sometime.